Welcome back, Wonders. It's Naidra. As Season 6 gets close to its halfway point, all of the meta builds, especially for the Spiritborn, have already been realized and, well, let's just say, starting to get a little bit boring. While I do love me some Quill Volley and love the ability to push pits higher than we've ever been able to do before, still like having a little bit of variety. And so with that said, I am still committing to finding other builds that are still a lot of fun to play, but also not the exact same thing over and over again. So for today's video, we're going to be taking a look at what I am calling the red and green flash, which is a new build I've been playing around with. It is a combination of toxic skin along with rushing claw, and I've just been having so much fun with it. So I'm going to share that with you guys today. We're going to go into a pit level 100 so that we can see how this works. And then after that, we'll take a look at our equipment. We'll also look at our skill tree and all of that other good stuff as well. Before we dive into it, just a quick reminder, if you guys have not yet subscribed to the channel, please do so. This is going to help me out significantly in continuing to make videos like this, and also helps support the channel overall. So I really would appreciate that. Now, that said, let's go ahead and jump into a pit and take a look and see how this works. Alrighty, so the way that this is going to work is we are, as usual, going to activate our defensives. So we'll start off with our armored hide, we'll activate Scourge and then counterattack as well. And then we will activate Toxic Skin and then follow it up with either the Hunter or Rushing Claw, depending on if you have the Hunter available. If you do use the Hunter, it is going to do more damage, so it's definitely recommended, especially if you're going against elite bosses or elite monsters. However, in most cases, you probably won't need to use that. And so you'll notice that we do have 17 charges of the Rushing Claw. That means that it's going to make it a lot easier for us to be able to pull enemies in as we're dashing from one enemy to another, bringing them in all together. And then we can use Vortex, which is one of the runes that we have enabled right now, that will suck them all in and allow us to basically take them all out at the same time. The other benefit to this build is because it is not necessarily reliant on Fel Soothsayer aspect, it does do well against all enemies, and it also does well against bosses as well, even if they don't necessarily have ads or if they're not summoning minions while you're going up against them. It is not because of the shatter effect that we're able to do this damage, but it certainly does help. So that being said, let's take a look and see how this works. We'll activate our defensives, dive in using the Hunter, Toxic Skin, and should be able to eliminate them pretty quickly. And then let's take a look at another group here. So it looks like we've got some good enemies up at the top. So let's group them up real fast. And we'll use Vortex to suck them in. And should be able to pretty quickly eliminate them. And the nice thing about this too is that because we're moving so quickly through these monsters, they're also not able to do very much damage to us as well. In fact, some of my resistances are in the negatives right now, and that still isn't hurting us at all, or it is still making sure that we're staying alive. So a lot of damage really quickly, and it's a lot of fun just because we're not sitting in one spot and just spamming away with the one specific skill. But we'll give this another shot here. We'll Vortex them in after we activate our defensives. And as you can see, we are doing billions and trillions of damage with this build as well. Alrighty, so starting off with our equipment, we are using a completely different weapon than we normally use. We are using the Whoosh Knock Pa, which is a unique glaive. I got extremely lucky. One of my buddies had this one specifically, and it had 4 GAs on it, and it's got the perfect aspect at the bottom. I have not personally landed on anything good this season yet, so I'm really excited to be able to take advantage of this. However, when we're looking at this guy, if we're looking at our masterworking, we are specifically going to want to masterwork supremacy all 3 times if possible. It's going to help us with our damage output greatly, so definitely recommend putting all your masterwork into this. Looking at our boots, we are using the duelist aspect, where we're going to be taking dexterity, maximum life, and toxic skin for the stats. We are going to temper on barrier generation and rushing claw as well. We want to have as many rushing claw charges as possible so we can keep moving quickly without necessarily needing to enhance our movement speed. So that is going to be coming from rushing claw. When we look at masterworking, we want to masterwork all 3 points into toxic skin. This alone is doing about 1 million damage per strike that we're doing with this guy. So we do want to make sure we maximize on this as much as possible. And then also when you're looking at your boots, I would recommend having the maximum evade charges as well. That does help to keep it moving a little bit quicker, so that way we can do speed runs with this as well. Looking at our pants, we are using the interdiction aspect as usual. We are going to take dexterity, maximum life, and armor for this guy. We want to try to have 5,000 plus armor if possible. So if you can get GA on armor, that'll be really helpful. And then we're going to temper on vortex size and maximum resolve stacks. We don't have vortex on our bar, but we are getting the effect coming from our runes. So we do definitely want to make sure that it can pull in as many enemies as possible at any given time. And then for our masterworking, we're going to masterwork maximum resolve stacks. We want to try to put all three into that so we can have 12 maximum resolve stacks on here. And then taking a look at our gloves, we are going to be taking the unyielding hits aspect, which is really helpful and definitely significantly increases our damage output as well. This happens every time we cast a gorilla skill, which is going to be all of the time. So when we take a look at the skills, we'll see where that's coming from specifically, but this is going to be the best aspect we can take for the gloves. And then we want to temper on barrier generation and critical strike damage, where ultimately when it comes to our masterworking, we either want to masterwork all three into maximum life, or if your armor is not quite where you need it to be, you could throw your masterworking into your armor as well. But we definitely want to have as much maximum life with this build as possible. Taking a look at our armor, we have the Shroud of False Death as per usual, and we want to masterwork all three into maximum life for this guy. When we look at the runes, we are using the Yule and the K runes. This is going to allow us to invoke Earthen Bulwark when we cast a skill with the cooldown 6 times. We are constantly casting skills with cooldown, so we should basically always have our Earthen Bulwark up at any given time. We are also using Harlequin's Crest with this build, which is pretty rare to see on a Spiritborn. We haven't really seen much use for a Shaco with this guy, but we do want to have as much cooldown as possible. So we are going to be using Shaco, and the +4 to all skills does help with our toxic skin as well. So really helpful there. And we definitely want to take advantage of the damage reduction as well. So this one is going to be perfect for this build. When you look at masterworking, you want to try to put all three into cooldown reduction. The more cooldown reduction we have, the more we can use all of our skills, including our ultimate, which means the more damage we can do and the quicker we can move through the pit or through the dungeon. So really helpful here. For the runes, we're going to be using the Sem and the Cry runes, which allow us to utilize our Vortex without necessarily having Vortex on our bar. And then we will be casting this when we cast evade 4 times. This is where having those additional evade charges on your boots comes in handy, because this now for me gives me a total of 5 evade charges, which allows me to basically use Vortex with every group. And by grouping them up, we're taking advantage of, once again, that shatter effect, which will eliminate our enemies a little bit quicker. And then jumping over to our amulet, we are using the redirected force aspect, where we are going to be taking dexterity, total armor, and cooldown reduction. If you can get one that's got a GA on all three, that would be perfect. If not, that's okay. We want to temper on rushing claw charges onto this, and also maximum resolve stacks, where we want to have all three of our masterwork into maximum resolve stacks. Again, if we can have 12 on each piece of equipment, that would greatly help us out and give us both tank ability and also damage output as well. So helpful to have that. For me, I have not yet been able to masterwork all three into maximum resolve stacks, but rushing claw is helpful to have as well. So either way, can't hurt, but you can do more damage by putting all three into maximum resolve stacks. Looking at our rings, we got, for the first ring, we've got the Feld Soothsayer aspect, and we're going to be taking dexterity, maximum life, and critical strike damage for the stats for this guy, where we're going to temper on critical strike damage along with incarnate cooldown reduction. We are using incarnate skills pretty much all of the time, so if we can have that cooldown a little bit quicker so we can make those more available, it's going to be helpful to us. And then when we masterwork, we want to try to put all three into maximum life. And And then lastly, we are using Wound Drinker for the second ring. It is extremely helpful that we're getting the additional toxic skin points into this. So naturally, we're going to want to masterwork all 3 into toxic skin as well. It doesn't hurt to have the additional damage to poisoned enemies and damage reduction from poisoned enemies, but the primary purpose of this ring is so that we can take advantage of that toxic skin. So if you get one with the GA, the one with toxic skin is going to be preferred. However, if you're like me and only have this, then this will work just as well. Looking at our gems, we're going to be using diamonds for our rings and amulet. If you're not too worried about your resistances, or if your resistances are doing better than me, you could throw some skulls on here, which will help out with your armor overall and bring this up significantly. And then for our pants and our weapon, we are going to be using emeralds to get some more dexterity and also to get some more critical strike damage overall. If you're struggling with barrier generation, you could throw amethyst onto the pants instead if you'd like to. However, that doesn't seem to be necessary with what we've currently got going on here. Taking a look at our skill tree, so we have 4 points into Thunder Spike, taking it up to Enhanced Thunder Spike, and then finishing it up with Accelerated Thunder Spike. While we don't have this on our bar, we're taking these points just so that we can move on down the skill tree. We're not going to be taking any core skills whatsoever, so we'll go ahead and skip past that part and move right on down to our focus skills, where we will be taking 1 point into Vortex, taking that up to Enhanced Vortex, and finishing it up with Measured Vortex. As I mentioned previously, we are not going to have this on our bar, but because we do have the Vortex runes on our equipment, this will allow us to take advantage of Vortex altogether. And then on the right hand side, we do have 1 point into Mirage, where we'll put 3 points into Unrestrained Power. And then we're also going to put 2 points into Swift. We would throw a third one on here if we could, since we are using mobility skills. However, since we don't have enough points to spare, we'll go ahead and just throw 2 on here. We'll move on down to Toxic Skin, where you'll notice we have a total of 21 ranks to this skill, and 16 of those are being contributed from items, which means yes, 5 points will be going into Toxic Skin. We'll take that down to Enhanced Toxic Skin and finish it up with Measured Toxic Skin. And then on the left-hand side, we've got 1 point into Focal Point and 3 points into Apex. We'll then make our way down to the next part of our skill tree, which will be the defensive skills. And as usual, we will be taking 1 point into Endurance and 3 points into Perseverance. We will then take 1 point into Armored Hide, taking it up to Enhanced Armored Hide, and finish it up with Reinforced Armored Hide. We also will be taking 1 point into Counterattack, taking it down to Counterattack Enhancement, and finishing it up with Reinforced Counterattack. We will be taking 1 point into Scourge, and then finish that up with 1 point into Enhanced Scourge. We'll then make our way down to our potency skills, where we will put 3 points into Resilient and 3 points into Dominant. And then we also will be putting 3 points into Potent and 3 points into Furnace. Now notice we are not putting any points into Rushing Claw. This is because we have our Shaco on, so it is automatically giving us those 4 points in here. However, we don't need to add any points into this. The primary purpose of having Rushing Claw in here is it's an extremely fast attack that is not utilizing our resource, and we have so many charges that we can continue hitting our enemies and continue going through them and applying that poison damage and the shatter effect to eliminate them. So we do not need to actually put any points into this, but we will skip down over to Ravenous, where we're going to be taking 3 points into this and 3 points into Oppressive. And then we'll make our way down to our ultimates, where we will be taking 3 points into Resolution, making our way up to Spiritual Attunement for 1 point, and then finishing it up with Supremacy for 3 points. Lastly, for the ultimate skills, we are going to be putting 5 points into the Hunter. We'll take that down to Harmonious Hunter, and we'll finish it up with Exalted Hunter. And then for the key passives, we're not going to be using Prodigy's Tempo this time. We are using the Noxious Resonance. This is what's going to allow us to take advantage of that additional shatter effect, which deals 100% of the total poisoning instantly to enemies, and also an additional 20% to the surrounding enemies, which is huge. Plus, on top of that, we're getting damage increased by 30% times of our critical strike damage bonus, which we have a lot of critical strike damage. So right now we're getting a total of 571% times damage bonus from this key passive. So really big to have, and definitely not going to be possible to utilize this build without having that on here. With that said, let's take a look at our Paragon board. So starting off on our first board, we will be taking the Colossal Glyph this time instead of Spirit. Our skills are considered guerrilla skills as well, so we are going to be able to take advantage of that 196.8% guerrilla damage along with the damage to close enemies. But most importantly, we're getting that 2% increased damage for each stack of resolve that we have, and we've got a lot of that, so this is going to be extremely helpful to have on board. Looking at our second board, we will be taking the Sapping board, and we're going to pair that up with the Spirit Glyph. So yes, we're still using this. We're getting almost 500% critical strike damage from this, which works really well with our key passive. And then moving on up to our third board, we will be taking the Viscous Shield board, and we're going to pair this one up with the Menagerist Glyph. We'll then make our way over to our fourth board, which will be the Convergence board, and we will pair up the Convergence board with the Fester Glyph. Once again, this is a poison build, and we are doing a lot of centipede damage, so for the first time, we'll have the opportunity to take advantage of the Fester Glyph. Moving on down to our fifth and final board, we will be taking the Revealing board, and we're going to pair this up with the Bane Glyph. Alrighty, now taking a look at our Spirit Hall, we are going to be taking the Gorilla for our primary spirit. This is what allows all of our skills to become Gorilla skills and allows us to take advantage of that Colossal Glyph. So really helpful to have this. And then for our secondary, we also will be taking Gorilla for this specific build. For our mercenary, we will be taking Subo for our primary. This is especially helpful if we're looking at grouping or pulling our enemies in. We'll know exactly where our enemies are and how many we can expect. So we'll know if it's worth us going out to try to pull them in, or if we want to just try to eliminate them before we move on to the next group. So we will be taking Subo for our primary. And for this guy, we are going to take the Wire Trap skill, moving it down to Piercing Arrows. We will then take Cover Fire and finish that up with Opening Fire. For our reinforcement, we will be taking Rahir, who's going to be using Bastion, and we're going to pair that up with the opportunity to cast when the player casts any skill in combat. You could also switch this to trigger whenever you're injured, which probably would be the most helpful, but I want to try to utilize this as often as I can to make sure that we're staying out of risk, and so I will be triggering this whenever we cast any skill in combat. With that being said, that's all I have for the red-green flash. I hope you guys enjoyed this build. I can't wait for you guys to try it out and let me know what you think. If you guys like this video, please don't forget to like, subscribe, and comment below if you haven't done so already. With that, if there's any other builds you guys would like me to try, especially as we get close to the midway part of the season, or even after the patch comes out shortly, please let me know in the comments below as well. With that, thank you guys so much for joining me, and until next time, Wanderers.